Hello everyone, welcome to the Eternal Spoiler Breakdown. My name is Pojo, and today we're going to be looking at a lot of Auralian cards, as well as one new display, which just got spoiled. So we have found out that they are doing a spoiler, well, they did a spoiler today for Auralia in particular, or the three-color faction of Time, Primal, and Shadow. And it has its own theme, which we might expect from the other four factions as well. So we're going to be talking about that theme, and we're going to be talking about that. But first things first, a card that we didn't get to before our previous spoiler breakdown, Display of Ambition. So, 3-cost, Fire, Justice, and Shadow. Your units get +1 Strength and Overwhelm, or draw 2 units from your Void and take 2 damage, or kill an enemy unit with 5 Strength or more. Yeah, this is a powerful looking fast spell, does a lot of cool things. The +1 and Overwhelm is a permanent buff, so if you apply that to all of your units, then that is just there for good, which means that if you're playing in a deck with a lot of, say, quick draw gunslingers, you feel pretty happy about it. Basically anywhere where you can just sort of get a pseudo rally type effect for 3 that actually gives you some good benefits. I would say that's pretty cool in tokens, and some pretty aggressive like gunslinger decks could be really decent. Also works well with lots of deadly units, lots of other sort of scary options. Like there are plenty of things that you can give Overwhelm that will be very scary once they have that extra +1 strength, and like a mini rally is usually quite useful for a lot of token based effects, and a lot of Grenadin based effects could be lots and lots of fun. Drawing 2 units from your Void or taking 2 damage is always like fun stuff, but yeah, like if you are okay, so this is a draw 2, take 2 for 3, which, as far as things go, that's one of the most powerful draw cards in non-primal that we've seen. Like, there aren't that many ways to draw 2 cards in Shadow or Time. Devour is one exception, but you have to sacrifice a unit for it. So card advantage-wise, this is one of the ones that can actually draw, like, more card advantage than quite a few cards in this particular faction set. But, of course, it does have to be from your Void, which is not always easy, and you do have the mild drawback of taking 2 damage, which can be very relevant and may actually be something that you have to worry about from time to time. Finally, killing an enemy unit with 5 health or more, that is just good stuff. Like, there are a lot of units with 5 health or more that definitely need killing, and this gives Fire access to some removal that is actually really interesting. Like, basically, Fire just doesn't have the ability to deal damage through a lot of things, and if you have a spell that is not only functioning as a damage dealer, but also manages to remove cards from the board, just basically if they have too much strength for you to kill with your regular damage dealing units, that's pretty cool in the faction pairing. Like, oftentimes you'll have to go for very specific removal in Shadow or very specific removal in Justice for this. This is something that like gives you basically access to the one thing that is your weakness, as long as you're playing your other 2 colors, which I think, yeah, that seems pretty cool. Overall, this card looks very strong. Of the displays, I think it actually definitely does give you just a lot of potential value. It's got like a mini smuggler's stash type effect that is actually going to be one of the more valuable modes that it can put out. It is a pretty good slay on a stick if you are, or just a pretty good slay overall if you are just trying to murder something that's in your way. And the ambition effect of just like getting +1 and Overwhelm, I would say that's not like particularly as important as the other 2 options, but it very frequently will win you games when you would not otherwise win games, and that's something that you really want out of your charms. So I think that, yeah, if you are splitting the difference between the 3, it's definitely got good modality. Like, it plays well in 3 different areas, and it has a lot of value in all of them. So I think that's really a good sign that this card is very well crafted, and yeah, hopefully we'll be seeing a lot of it played. All of the displays thus far look like cards that you just want to have in those 3-color decks, so seems very exciting. We're gonna see some stuff with it. Okay. Another one that got spoiled that is not an Auralian card that we need to talk about is Syl, Hand of the Cabal, which is Unblockable Pledge Stonescar card. When Syl hits the enemy player, you get +1 power for this turn for each of your units that dealt damage. That isn't dealt damage to the enemy player, that is dealt damage period. So if you charge in with a bunch of Stonescar Gunslingers, Syl, Hand of the Cabal is going to ramp you for a ridiculous amount of, like, just damage. This card, combined with cards like Yushkov, gives you access to more unit-based ramp cards that are pretty interesting. You also get to do some shenanigans, maybe with Berserk. It's a little bit harder to say. Like, you can't actually get Berserk shenanigans here unless you give Syl, Hand of the Cabal Berserk, but if you give Syl Berserk, she ramps twice, and the second time she ramps for as much as all of your Berserk units ramped for, which is kind of fun, I think. I'm not sure, I think it wouldn't count twice, never mind, because it's for each of your units that dealt damage, not how many times they dealt damage. But nonetheless, like there are some cool ways that you can maybe like get her to ramp twice with Berserk, which could be very, very fun. So this effect triggers every time that Syl hits the enemy player, and Syl is an unblockable 5-drop, which with 4 damage, that is a clock all on its own. I think this card is really reasonable as far as Stone Scar goes, and this card seems like it's gonna be doing some hot nonsense. It is very aggressive. You get to end out in like a Flame Blast or some other sort of like really ridiculous fire card at the top, which is not something that Stone Scar usually gets to do. Like as far as like Stone Scar mid-range goes, this looks like a card that can really support that archetype again and make it into a very interesting archetype that plays around with a lot more unblockable sources of damage and direct damage. So yeah, I think this card looks awesome. I'm really excited to play with it. Like I like Stone Scar Maulers, I like playing Stone Scar mid-range, and this is a card that really supports those archetypes in a fun way. So this card looks really, really strong. It's very hard to kill. It's good color pairing. Like it does everything you want it to do, and the pledge ability is a definite huge bonus that makes up for its general lack of stats, which really not too bad for a 5-drop. Okay. So, let's talk about Auralia. We have found out that Auralia is announced as a time, primal, and shadow color. We don't have a solid Auralian legendary to sort of demonstrate exactly that color pairing, but Auralia does have a theme. That theme has been announced, and that theme is relics, which, man, I couldn't be happier about that. So, we're gonna have to extend these a little bit because these images are a little bit lower quality than the other ones, but Auralia has relics, and they have a lot of relics, and they have relics in a lot of different factions and a lot of different colors, and most importantly, a lot of different costs. So we already saw Secret Passage, the 1-cost relic in Shadow, but there are some 1-cost relics in Primal as well, and of course Time has access to some small ones too, so we're gonna see some actual relic synergy, which is really, really cool if you want to play, especially with a lot of the Explorer relic synergy that has been out there since the beginning, but is just interesting in general, because relics are a lot of fun, and there's a lot of cool things that you can do with them. So let's look at Eternity Core. This is a +2 maximum power for 4. This of course does allow you to ramp into ridiculous nonsense. I actually really like this card. It's a slightly weaker like Mask of Torment style effect in many senses, but it also just reliably gets you up to 6, so you can just play Eternity Core on 4 and immediately ramp into Mystic Ascendant. You can get into 7-drops even if you are playing your 7th power, so you can like immediately start playing Carnosaurs and Mystic Ascendants and all of the big nasty scary stuff in Time that happens to be up at the 6 and 7 mark. That all is pretty accessible when you're playing Eternity Core on 4. It's not a huge turn to take off overall, like it is your Sandstorm Titan turn, but oftentimes I think that there is definitely some availability in this slot. If you want to like run Trailmaker into Eternity Core, this could potentially be a pretty good ramp effect, and it is a lot of ramp in a very permanent basis in a very short period of time. So card looks awesome. I'm looking forward to seeing some fun decks that just skip like turns 5 and 6 with it and see exactly what all we can do with it, because yeah, like this is clearly like ridiculous ramp, and like obviously just like Mono Time that wants to dump a Carnosaur on turn 5 is certainly happy to have it. So could be some interesting options with it. I think I'm most excited by like just going into mid-range and playing mid-range unit after mid-range unit after mid-range unit, but you can also potentially get some very, very good results from this with like just maximum power base weapons and like just playing around with relics in a way that you can do something fascinating. So yeah, if you want to just like get a great Parliament for 8, Eternity Core is there to provide. Power Stone was a pretty powerful card, and when it was printed it saw quite a bit of play. It hasn't seen as much play lately since I think Trailmaker and like a bunch of other stuff has really supplanted it, but overall this card looks reasonably strong and should be pretty fun and ranked for getting into some nonsense. Okay, so relic-wise, we were talking about 1-drop relics. So first we've got Pitfall Trap. Once per turn you may pay 1 to draw a card, then discard a card. Use only if you have played a unit this turn. So a minor effect, but a better one than most 1-drop relics have at the moment. Like Infinite Hourglass is pretty strong. Sandstorm Scarf is pretty strong, but like, you know, this is probably the third one-drop relic that we've seen, and overall this doesn't look like a bad effect at all, especially since you don't have to pay too much, and you get a pretty good benefit out of it. You get to basically just sort through your deck and do a lot of interesting things in unit-based strategies, which, yeah, I think that's pretty reasonable. The summon ability is deal 1 damage to an enemy, so this is a one-drop relic that kills an Oni runner on the turn that it comes out, or messes with your opponent's Aegises, or does a bunch of other interesting things to keep aggro at bay. I think Pitfall Trap looks pretty exciting. Like, this card looks a lot of fun to play, and should be very good in Relic Matters strategies, because Relic Matters is Auralia's theme. And if you're playing a bunch of one-drop relics, then you can potentially do a lot of cool things with it. Notably, like, there are some cards that actually count how many relics that you have. There are cards that are going to be more interested in what kind of relics you play. And now we have some sacrifice relic abilities to basically get good benefits out of sacrificing relics. That leads us into Governor Sahin. Once per turn, you may pay 3 and sacrifice a relic to play the top relic of your deck. Governor Sahin is a 3/3 Explorer in Shadow, and this is, I think, our first Shadow Explorer, or at least Mono Shadow Explorer. What he is the governor of, I am not particularly certain. He appears to be being carried by a group of people, and he has some clothing that would indicate that he is perhaps of a faction that we are not particularly familiar with. This might actually be the Auralian Empire. Once per turn, you may pay... So the ability to sacrifice a relic to play the top relic of your deck allows you to jump into very, very large, ridiculous relics. Most notably, Sword of the Sky King is very strong. If you want to get, like, the Last Word, which is definitely a shadow relic that is well worth grabbing, this looks really, really fun. And if you're playing just cheap relics, or even just a pile of expensive relics, you probably feel okay using Governor Sahin to just jump into cooler relics every turn that you are out there. But you can also use him to try to find particular relics for things that you might need. If you just want to, like, play Pitfall Traps with summon abilities over and over and over again, that's certainly quite reasonable. If you are interested in... there are some options. Like, he's got some potential to basically shuffle relics around, but I think the most important thing about him is that he has the potential to cheat out an 8-drop or a 9-drop in a very, very short period of time. It's interesting to say that, like, Auralia is Primal Shadow time, but I want to play it with so many different fire cards. Like, I just want to play this with Claw of the First Dragon and all of, like, the big ridiculous 7-drop and 8-drop relics, and I want to play it with all the Relic Matters Explorers and Praxis. So I think there are some 4-color shenanigans that can definitely happen as a result of this whole, like, shadow version of relics being introduced. And now we're going to be seeing more Shadow relics. We're also going to be seeing some cards that care about relics in Shadow. In addition to Governor Sahin, we also have Lethral Lobotomy, which sacrifices a relic to kill an enemy unit. Now, this is a cheapish effect that has the same sort of setup as Combust, and you can definitely do some cool things with it. I would say that there are some potential options, but I'm not sure. People are asking if this kills gifts, and I'm not actually sure. Either one of these sacrifice relic abilities might do that, but I think you might have to control the relic. We'll find out. Okay. So Lethral Lobotomy, probably not as good as a Combust in practice, but it is monocolored, which is nice, and it's also fairly effective at getting rid of, like, some things that you might not really need anymore, particularly, like, if you want to just play a Pitfall Trap for a damage, and then Lethral Lobotomy again, then you can get some pretty good value out of Pitfall Trap and then sacrifice it to kill something later. If you are interested in getting relics in your Void for some reason, Lethral Lobotomy is going to get you there, and for that reason it might actually get particularly strong if there are Void Matters or Relic in the Void Matters cards that are going to care about that. Like, basically, one of the reasons why Combust is so strong is because, like, you really want to sacrifice Grenadins for a lot of different reasons, particularly triggering tributes and entombs. Basically, if that kind of thing happens with relics as well, then Lethral Lobotomy is good. If there isn't a real reason to put a bunch of relics into your Void, Lethral Lobotomy is a little bit weaker. It is unconditional kill spell, and it's an unconditional kill spell at 1, so don't count it out. This is potentially very, very strong, and potentially as strong as Combust, depending on the strength of relics and the strength of the 1-drop and 0-drop relics in there. I don't think it's going to measure up quite as well as Combust in terms of, like, ranked potential, but I do think that it will see play, and certainly some decks are going to want it if we are going to be playing decks that really care about sacrificing relics. Everybody wants Azurite Prixis with this. Yes, that's fine. It's a 2-for-1, but it is a 2-for-1 at a 0 cost, and if you actually get it off the top, it's free. There are dumb things that can happen with Prixis decks, and perhaps Prixis will actually be of use in Auralia. I think that's very likely, considering that there's just a lot of cards that really seem to care about relics. So probably we'll find one that actually works with Prixis. Okay, so Lethral Lobotomy and Governor Sahin, what are we trying to ramp into? Well, in addition to all of the big relics that we've already seen, we've also got Pit of Lenecta. So this is a 9-drop, triple time. Has a small effect that's not as important as its big effect, but the small effect is when an enemy unit goes to a void, you gain 2 health, which at 9, not going to be super useful, but maybe it'll stabilize you if something else bad happens. The Empower, however, is play 2 7/7 Sandworms exhausted. So for every power that you play, that's worth a good 28 points of stats. Might be okay. Might be okay. Those stats are exhausted. The Sandworms do not get to block on the turn that they are played, or the turn after. So they don't get to attack or block. They don't get to be useful until the turn after, which, if you are paying 9 for Pit of Lenecta, is way too long to go without doing anything. Paying 9 and then skipping the following turn is real not strong. But if you have an Infinite Hourglass or some sort of endurance card out, then yeah, you'll be in an okay position by playing Pit, because the Sandworms will not be able to do anything on the turn that they come out, but they will ready immediately and be able to block that turn. So obviously, Pit of Lenecta and Infinite Hourglass are definitely destined to go with each other, and since you have the ability to sacrifice excess Infinite Hourglasses with your new removal cards and your new Baron, you can now run 4 Infinite Hourglass in your deck and not feel ashamed. Like, this is actually like a really interesting thing about it, is that Infinite Hourglass, a very, very powerful card that does not see a lot of play because it's pretty hard to run as a 4 of, kind of okay as a 1 of, and then just a little bit too weak to generally be run in markets unless you really, really need it. Now you can just run it as a 4 of in a deck, use it to sacrifice for kill spells for your shadow stuff, or for whatever like interesting Relic Matters cards are out there, and then like use it to basically summon out like a Pit of Lenecta with a Baron, or do something along those lines, and then it will actually be useful in conjunction with Pit of Lenecta. So yeah, that's pretty cool. So Pit of Lenecta at 9 is just going to fill your board with Sandworms. Like, there's no way that you don't just get an insane amount of meat on the board with this card. However, I don't think this card is particularly strong. I think it's just too expensive. Obviously, shenanigans that get it out are going to be a lot of fun, but once you get it out, I think your opponent finds Relic Destruction, and like they've got a little bit of time to do it, or at least a little bit of time to wipe the board. And overall, it will win games, but it's just so slow, and then it's also slow after you've played it and you've empowered. Like, I just feel like there's so much high risk for a reward that you then have to wait for. It's too many openings, too many different ways that you're going to get just basically bombed out by the Pit. Still, it is fun, and big worms are hilarious, and obviously, like, if you want to like play multiple Empower effects, you can get a full board of Sandworms very, very quickly. A New Tomorrow plays more Sandworms than you can actually have on the board, so yeah, this card is hilarious. It definitely does some cool stuff. I just feel like there's so many hoops to jump through, and the reward is actually not that strong. It's kind of like the 7/7 Exhausted Draft Worm is just good enough as a reward in Wormstone in Draft, but it was never played in Ranked. Pit of Lenecta is like twice as much cost, a little bit more than that, for twice as much value, and repeatable value at that, but it also means that you're probably going to be in a lot of trouble. However, if you are able to consistently wipe the board or do something to actually kill your opponent's units with Pit of Lenecta, then yeah, there's some value out of it that you can get out of this. I don't think it's awful. It's just maybe like a little too slow and pretty likely to just leave a massive opening that your opponent can definitely take advantage of. There's so many different ways to respond to Pit of Lenecta. The main one is just by killing you, but also Relic Destruction, big sweepers, there's possibilities. Nonetheless, cool card, fun card, great big Timmy card with a lot of big worms in it. I really, really like that. All right. Okay, one more card in the Auralian factions, but only a little bit relic focused. It's still pretty relic focused. This is our Elf Tribal card, Zende the Heartbinder. Another pledge card, so can be played as blue or purple power. Yay, always good. Summon, play an elf with cost 4 or less from your void. If you have a relic, then you get to play 2 instead. Now keep in mind that there are elves that actually grab spells from your void that cost 4 or less. Like, that exists right now. All you need is an elf ally. So Zende the Heartbinder basically triggers an almost cascade-like effect where if you have a relic, you just get to play her, play 2 of the elf that plays spells back, or that gets spells back, draw 2 spells, and that's like a 5-for-1 just by playing her. Which, yeah, that's pretty crazy. There are some other elves that might be of interest. Like, certainly there's some like cool ones like Direwood Beastcaller if you're giving them charge with Haunting Scream, that kind of nonsense. There's going to be some cool ones printed. Like, we've seen a couple of really interesting ones. The 4-drop elves include like the 3/5 that destroys every weapon in your opponent's deck, or discards every weapon in the opponent's deck. There's fun stuff here. I haven't seen a lot of particularly strong elves, but the ability to play 2 of them back from the dead is making this card really, really worth it, assuming you can get the relic down, which in Feln, not the easiest thing, but in Auralian, probably very, very simple. Obviously, we have an elf theme going on in this faction. I still don't know what elves are, or what they do, or how they work. We have known that Feln are elves for ages and ages and ages, but as far as like what elf lore is, I don't know. Hopefully we'll see some stories about them soon, because what their role is in Defiance is becoming more and more important, and as to what they do, I have no idea. Yeah, Zende is exciting though. Like, this is a card that definitely does a lot of ridiculous stuff in a really fun and ridiculous way. So like crazy elves with a lot of value can be fun. Champion of Cunning does in fact cost 5. So does Ashara, but if you were to reduce the cost of those, you could get them back with Zende, and getting Champion of Cunning back with Zende in particular in like a Feln Stonescar mix with Quarry, yeah, that would be pretty disgusting. Like, if you're just playing blue, purple, red with Quarry, and you just occasionally get Champion of Cunning to cost 4, then you can play it back with Zende every turn, and then it also buffs Zende. That's a game over. It's real hard to come back from that. But there's some interesting shenanigans there. So yeah, this card is fun. It definitely makes you want to look at your elves and find something cool to do with them, which I don't think the previous one, I believe it's called Lethral Darkstrider, did do. That card was just a little bit too weak. People didn't really play with it very much. It was kind of fun, but it really only fit in Haunting Scream. Elves kind of have a Haunting Scream thing in general, like they really like that card, but this just looks like something that is, you know, like as far as things go, it seems interesting, but I'm not sure, like, or rather, like, this is a lot more interesting than how Darkstrider seemed. This is just going to do some really fun things. And being a big 4/4 beater in the air is a nice follow-up to getting all of your cool card advantage. I think that's a really reasonable card. All of these pledge cards have just had, like, you know, the slightly weaker stat line. That is a thing that you have to worry about. But they are so consistent, they play power so consistently, and they add so much to your deck just by having them that they're usually going to be pretty good finishers to have in the deck. I think they're well worth it. And Zende looks really, really exciting. I believe that is it for our spoilers for today, unless I missed one. Syl, Eternity Core, Pitfall, Governor, Zende, and Pit. We are all good. So that's every single one of them. Auralia looks exciting. I'm so excited to play dumb Auralian stuff and dumb Auralian plus Praxis stuff. Like, Explorer and Relic Matters is going to be really, really fun. Like, we have these all of these interesting synergies that are opening up as a result of like new smaller relics being printed. There's so many different decks to play with just as a result of Auralia being a faction and Auralia being something that actually is pushing relics in particular. Like, I'm just really, really excited about this. This is all of the interesting things that I'm hoping to do just getting revealed. I'm really hoping to see more Auralian cards. I want to see more Auralian cards probably more than I want to see the faction identities of the other factions. But I am pretty excited to see the other factions as well. So hopefully we'll have some more on that. They might even release them, like, you know, if we were predicting when they were going to release, and it is going to be in the next like 2 weeks or so, because we expect to see, there are Defiance packs in the sealed list. They could do it literally one every day and probably release on Friday. We'd have to be pretty lucky for that. It might be something a little bit different. But I'm hoping that we'll see other factions soon, and we'll see how many they release before the actual full release of the game. And in the meantime, this has been me with, Eternal's spoiler breakdowns. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you really enjoyed this. This is exciting, and we are out for now. Cheers.